Welcome to the ultimate warrior build for Dragon Dogma 2. We got a lot to talk about and I'm tired of doing YouTube intros, so make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video and so as to not miss out on any future content. Welcome to Purge Evil. Thank you for stopping by. Let's get into it. What is the warrior vocation good at? How do you play the warrior? Simple. There are three things the warrior is focused on at all times: damage, big damage, and bigger damage. Really, the warrior focuses on clearing groups and knocking around large enemies. It does have some single target abilities, which are quite useful in their own right, but for the most part, you're going to be taking the most damage while dealing the most damage. Because of your gear, a core skill, and you just being an absolute unit, taking damage doesn't even matter as a warrior, especially if you run with a mage in your party. You'll always want to focus your attacks on the biggest and toughest enemy around, or swinging like a madman if there's a group. There's not much else in how to play the warrior, aside from some neat little combos. One such important combo that you can use with the base skills is to barge and standard attack immediately after. You can then follow up with more standard attacks, a heavy attack to finish them, or barge again as necessary to prevent any incoming damage. This is a combo that you should use for the entirety of the game, as it is quicker than most, if not all, attacks, and stuns the enemy briefly so they can't move out of the way or attack back. This is definitely the go-to combo that you're going to want to use against normal singular enemies. Of course, the blade can hit multiple though. We will get into a few more combos that I like to use in the weapon skills section, and you can also check out my warrior skill tier list, link in the description. Another main go-to attack you're going to want to use for the entire game is the standard heavy attack against grounded or stunned opponents, especially large ones like the Cyclops, as it deals an insane amount of extra damage and outclasses most, if not all, skills in those situations. All in all, the base attacks along with barge are truly your bread and butter, so try to become proficient with those, not relying on only your weapon skills. Another important note I'd like to make: mounting large enemies as a warrior is really just for fun. While you can do big damage with the heavy attack, I've found in my travels that it's far better for the warrior to stay on the ground, charging up attacks and toppling the foe. Core skills. Alright, for core skills, make sure to buy all of them as they become available. Out of the 4 core skills, there are 3 that slightly change how you approach combat. I will briefly go over these. First, we have Breakneck Strike, which enables your charged attacks to deal even more damage if you unleash the attack at the moment it is fully charged up. Needless to say, this is something you're going to always want to aim for. Next is the Chain of Blows, which now allows you to continue swinging your base attack after the initial swing. You can time these to maintain a decent speed with your chain of attacks. Definitely get used to this. As stated before, the base attack is your bread and butter and you're better off using it than most skills in quite a few situations. Third, we have Repulse, which admittedly I don't think I've ever actually landed because I forgot about it for like half the game, and by that time I was just stun locking Cyclops and the like. But either way, Repulse allows you to parry incoming attacks by unleashing your own charged attack at the same time that you would be struck. Definitely can be fun to play around with, but it's not likely to be a necessity in your arsenal. I would be aware that you have this, but I wouldn't go out of my way to make it happen. With that being said, if one were to become proficient with this skill, I could see that person feeling like an absolute badass. Outside of those, the Bulwark core skill simply reduces damage you take while charging attacks, which will be most of the time. Augments. Okay, moving on to augments, I will first explain the warrior augments I like to run, and then I will go over a few augments from other vocations that can be great additions to the build. Vitality is the first augment you unlock and simply increases your max health. You can never go wrong with this and will most likely use it for a while. I consider this an optional augment by the end of the build. Impact improves pushing and pulling capability, and I never even purchased this one as it is far more useful as a warrior to topple enemies from the ground rather than mount them. Pertinacity improves your ability to break through an opponent's guard, and this is a must-have in my opinion. I run this one 9 times out of 10, though Barge works pretty well for breaking guard too. Dominance is a must-have as it improves your knockdown power, which is essential to the warrior's playstyle. Always make sure to have this equipped once unlocked. And for the last warrior augment, Intrepid reduces the culmination of your loss gauge when taking damage, which isn't necessary in the early to mid game, but can become extremely beneficial in the late game. I highly recommend equipping this in the later stages of the game. Okay, moving on to some augments from other vocations. First, we have a couple from Fighter. Here we have Metal, which is another optional augment similar to Vitality that simply increases your physical defense. Second, at level 4 Fighter, you can obtain Provocation, which for me is an absolute must-have as I'm essentially the tank of my party. This increases the likelihood of enemies targeting you, so basically just gives you more aggro, which is exactly what you want when you're charging up a Raising Sweep. In the Archer vocation, you can unlock Lethality at level 8, which is an exceptional augment for the warrior as it increases damage when striking an enemy's vital weak spot. I would say this is a must-have, but you do have to level Archer quite a bit, so it's really up to you. As an honorable mention, the Thief vocation contains Verve at level 9, which simply improves your strength, an optional augment, but one to take note of if you've leveled into Thief at all. You can also note that Polarity from Mystic Spearhand is a good fit as it increases your strength during daytime. I like to roam around at night quite often though, so I won't recommend this as a necessity. Skills. Now, regarding skills, honestly, I like to switch out my skills quite often for the simple reason of most of them just being fun. There are a few, however, that are equipped more often than not. Before I jump into my most preferred set of skills, do note that I have a tier list video where I rank every warrior skill, so if you're curious and want a better explanation of the skills, there is a link down below in the description and pinned comment. Okay, my selection of choice, this is my go-to set of skills that you can find me running a majority of the time. For my big two attacks, I like to have Heavenward Sunder and Mountain Breaker. Both of these can be used interchangeably to topple large enemies, and they both do great damage. Using them together is outright disgusting, and not only do they do big poise damage, they also have the ability to hit flying creatures, as well as with the Heavenward Sunder, the blade actually slides along the ground at first, which enables you to strike enemies from below, like the rock lizards. I can see some people choosing Indomitable Lash for this combo, but I think the extra utility and precision far outshine the lash, as well as when the lash is most useful with enemies staggered or on the ground. I tend to just use the base heavy attack most of the time, as it's basically just free damage with the animations it gives. For my other two main skills, I like to run Raising Sweep and Ravening Lunge. Raising Sweep as a mid ground between normal and heavy enemies, as well as for easy and quick group clearing. It's also super easy to use, and you're unlikely to be staggered while charging it, even in the middle of several enemies attacking you, which is the perfect place to use it. There's probably more I can say about this one, but just refer to the tier list if anything. And for Ravening Lunge, this is just an absolute blast to use. It's super useful for control and positioning, and on top of that, it actually does pretty decent damage. My fourth skill slot is usually reserved for something unique, and in this case, with Ravening Lunge being a single target attack, sometimes I will swap this out for Arc of Might whenever I feel I may encounter a tough enemy or just want to be safe. These four skills together cover just about everything you need: huge poise damage, group clearing, ability to hit flying enemies and enemies from underneath, and ability to reposition at a moment's notice while also knocking out an ad or two. I could play the entire game with this skill selection without ever needing to change, though it is fun to swap out for skills like Tidal Wrath just to have a bit of fun. If you're going for pure destruction, you cannot go wrong with this set of skills. Again, Indomitable Lash is also a good choice to throw in there. Gear. Okay, gear is pretty straightforward, but with a little twist. As usual, wear the best armor you can find, or just go Fashion's Dogma, and wield the best sword you can find. Note that as a warrior, you can also use big hammers, which deal blunt damage and are objectively better for toppling enemies. You're always going to want to upgrade your gear as much as possible, but depending on where you upgrade, your gear will receive different benefits. In the land of Vermund, the smithies here will have a balanced upgrade, decreasing the weight and increasing the strength and physical defense at an equal rate to magic defense. As a warrior, this is a waste of an upgrade in my opinion. If you travel to Batal and upgrade at the smithies there, your gear will actually increase in weight, which is a con, but you'll get a far better damage and defense buff. Once you've been to Batal, any gear you acquire as the warrior should be upgraded here. There's also dwarven smithing, which I don't have any footage of, but it can be easily found when pursuing the magic archer quest. This will increase knockdown power and knockdown resistance and give a more balanced buff to your main stats while also increasing the weight as well. I would say this is better than Batal smithing, but you could always mix the two if you prefer. Batal smithing on your armor and some dwarven smithing on your weapon. Just play around with it and have fun, as in the end, min-maxing does not matter too much in this game. As a quick note, the two rings I wear the most are the Ring of Vehemence, which makes your attacks more likely to stagger and knock down enemies, and the Ring of Disfavor, which increases the likelihood of being targeted, similar to the Pertinacity Augment. If you have some favorite rings you like to wear, definitely let us know down in the comments. Main pawn. Moving on to my preferred main pawn setup. A quick note, I did eventually switch her into Sorcerer, and I was very satisfied with the damage output. At that point, I just hired someone else's mage pawn from the Rift that had similar abilities as my own. For the purposes of this video, I will just describe the mage setup, as it is the perfect right hand to the warrior. In this scenario, my support pawns vary, but almost always include an archer and or a thief, a classic setup if nothing else. The thief is particularly useful with the grappling hook, which allows you to one-shot enemies on the ground. Archer is good for obvious reasons, but sometimes I switch this out with a sorcerer. Alright. Finally, my mage. There are two extremely important spells that I recommend having equipped at all times. First, we have Celerity, which gives you a well-deserved buff to speed and is incredibly underrated in my opinion. Especially as a warrior, having this speed buff almost constantly during fights makes a huge difference than moving normally. Not only that, it also has the utility outside of combat to make sprinting to locations much quicker. This is a mainstay for my mage, and I highly recommend it be for yours as well. Second, we have Halidom. Being a warrior, you're going to take tons of damage from all types of sources. Some of those sources will also inflict debuffs, in which you could use a curative or inspirit, but that just isn't necessary when your mage can do it for you while you continue to attack. Halidom cures you of several debuffs, and I highly recommend having it equipped at all times. Those are really my main two, and my other skills tend to vary, but I do like to have lightning affinity at times. Argent Zuck is great, as it is an instant heal and will heal you over time. Palladium is good but not necessary, as the warrior already has tons of damage resistance. And finally, the ultimate mage skill, Celestial, however you pronounce that, is a huge buff that increases your speed, stamina recovery, and reduces damage taken. If I actually had this unlocked, I would probably always run this on my main pawn, but I'm sure you can find someone else's pawn who has it equipped if need be. The same rules apply to the pawn's gear, but make sure to upgrade with Elven Smithing, which focuses on magic. Once again, I don't have footage of this, but I will leave that up to you. I will also entrust the augments you use to your judgment, as this video is already getting pretty long, and I could talk about those for quite some time. Fear not, there will be a video for that in the future. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and or found it helpful, and definitely leave a comment if you have something to add to the build. My Patreon is linked down below if you'd like to show some love and support the channel. You'll also gain access to exclusive content, of course. But alas, that is all I have for today. Thank you for stopping by, and until next time, purge evil.
Oh, yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah.